everything. Your presence that walks with us, your presence that goes before us, behind us, surrounds us, embraces us. That presence that is filling the room and every heart in this moment, that can do what only you can do and no man can. God, I thank you for what you've already done in the room, for what you are doing right now, for what you're gonna do this morning. Give him a hand of praise. Say thank you, God. I'm gonna invite the kids to go to class, middle school, class 2. And don't sit down just yet. We're gonna read the Bible together, so you can stand with me for a few more minutes. Get your steps in, stretch your legs before you sit down. You ready? We're gonna read Exodus 33 today. We're gonna get all of the reading done at the beginning. You ready? God said to Moses, "Now go. Get on your way from here, you and the people you brought up from the land of Egypt. Head for the land which I promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I will send an angel ahead of you, and I'll drive out the Canaanites, Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. It's a land flowing with milk and honey. But I won't be with you in person. You're such a stubborn, hard-headed people, lest I destroy you on the journey." When the people heard this harsh verdict, they were plunged into gloom and wore long faces. No one put on jewelry. God said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, you're one hard-headed people. I couldn't stand being with you even for a moment. I'd destroy you. So take off all your jewelry until I figure out what to do with you." So the Israelites stripped themselves of their jewelry from Mount Horeb and on. Moses said to God, "Look, you tell me, lead this people, but you don't tell me whom you're going to send with me. You tell me, I know you well, and you are special to me. Let me, if I am so special to you, let me in on your plans. That way, I will continue being special to you. Don't forget, this is your people, your responsibility." And God said, "My presence will go with you, and I will see the journey to the end." And Moses said, "If your presence doesn't take the lead here, call this trip off right now. How else will it be known that you're with me in this, with me and your people? Are you traveling with us or not? How else will we know that we're special and your people among all other people on this planet Earth?" And God said to Moses, "All right, just as you say, this also I will do for you, for I know you well, and you are special to me, and I know you by name." Say, "I know you by name." All right, let's sit. You guys ready? Harsh words, right? Do you think that's how God said it? "Lest I destroy you on this journey," or was it like, "Yeah, I might destroy you"? I'm not. How did he say it? In your life, have you ever felt like really successful in one area and then really defeated or without hope in another area? It's like everything's going great at work, but my home life sucks right now. Or everything is great at home and home is awesome and we're having the best time as a family, but work, I'm like so stuck there and work sucks right now and I'm not enjoying any bit of it. Or, in school, you're doing great in math class. Man, all A's, you ace every test, you don't have to study. But science, chemistry really got you. Like, you just, no, you can't. Or everything's going really great financially, but your health is failing. Or the other way around, you've never felt better. It's like you finally got good habits. You're eating the right things. You finally said goodbye to your Diet Coke addiction and all of that. You know, you're feeling great. You've got energy again. But financially, it doesn't matter. You can't get it together. Or you finally feel really great about your relationship with God, but then everything else in life doesn't seem to make sense. Like you finally figured one area out, and then it feels like the dominoes are just falling in a different area. And when you face drastic opposites like that in life, things just start to feel like they don't make sense, and life becomes really confusing. If you've arrived here today with specific questions to God that you've been asking him for weeks or for months about, what about this one area? What about this one thing? Why is it all good over here, but this part over here doesn't make sense? I want you to hear God today when he says, we're past that. Say that with me. Say, we're past that. And in this passage that we read just now, we get to listen in on a really raw and honest conversation between God and Moses. And it sounds like the kind of conversation that you might have with a close friend or with your husband or with your wife. But be honest for a moment. Could you have this kind of conversation, like what we see Moses telling God? Could you have that kind of conversation with God? Because Moses was pushing back on God. He was like, you tell me you love me. You tell me that you care for me. You tell me that I'm special. So why haven't you told me what we're doing here and what's going to happen? If I'm so special, tell me the plan. Are you bold enough like that in your relationship with God to say, hello, you told me that I'm special, but I'm not seeing it right now. Tell me the plans. When I read this story, it reminded me of my early 20s. Yes, really. Because, okay, so my husband and I, David, have been best friends since I was 11, and he's 3 years older than me, so he was 14. We've been best friends for forever. We didn't start, like, dating until high school. Why? Because it wasn't time, and I had a really interesting dynamic at home where my dad didn't want me to date anybody, so that's why. I was obedient. I will tell everyone, I was obedient. David can attest to it. My husband can tell you that. I was obedient. And we stayed friends until mom and dad said it was okay.
Was David obedient?
Was David obedient? David was maybe more obedient than I was. David was maybe more obedient. But you see, once we got to our 20s, I had already gotten my undergrad degree. I was living in Stillwater because I went to OSU and I did graduate school in Stillwater. And so I see some hands back there. Yeah, go OSU. And I remember David had already bought a house by then. He was living at the house that he had bought, and I was living in Stillwater. And I remember telling him, like, you tell me you love me. You tell me that you can't see yourself with anyone but me, and we've been together forever, so why don't you want to marry me? Why don't you propose? Why aren't we engaged? And when I read, don't you want to marry me? If I'm so special, why don't you want to marry me? And so when I read this story of Moses and God, if I'm so special, I thought of myself, like, if I'm so special, why don't you want to marry me? But you know, conversations like that kind of pushback, can only happen in a relationship when you have history together. Because you have to have a certain level of comfort. You gotta have a certain level of trust to know that you can speak directly to the other person and they're not gonna get offended. They're not gonna say, oh, how dare you speak to me that way? You gotta have a certain level of comfort. And in Moses and God's case, they had been through a lot together. Before this conversation, Moses and God had been through this scene of the burning bush. They had been through 10 plagues that probably took like 6 months to a year by the time all of that was said and done, where Moses had been sent to the people of Israel to set them free. He'd go to Pharaoh and he'd say, let my people go. And God told him ahead of time, you're gonna ask, but he's not gonna let you go. I'm just letting you know, but you still have to go and ask. And he had all of these experiences with God. He had been at the Red Sea. He had parted the Red Sea when God said, put your staff there, split the waters. They had been in the desert for quite some time already. And he had seen God provide manna and quail fall from the sky so that the people had something to eat in the middle of the desert. He had seen God tell him, hit the rock, and water would come out of the rock because the people didn't have anything to drink because they're in the desert walking in circles. They had even been in battle together. Before this story that we see here, this conversation even happens, there was this one time where the Israelites are fighting a battle against, I think it was the Amalekites. Someone who can remember better, tell me. I think it was the Amalekites, where Moses would get tired. And Aaron and Hur would have to come and hold his hands up because as long as his hands were up, and his staff was up and he was holding everything up, then the Israelites would win the battle. But as soon as his hands fell, the Israelites would begin to lose the battle. And so all these people that were around him, like his leaders around him, noticed that. And they were holding up his hands. So Moses had been to multiple kingdoms with God. He had been through a lot with God. He had talked to him on the mountain, been with God on a mountain 40 days and 40 nights and got the 10 commandments. All of that happens before this conversation. So Moses and God had history, deep trust, miracles, frustrations, moments of intimacy, fights. They had been through a lot. And I think that in this moment, Moses could have very well doubted God and said, oh, it doesn't look like he's gonna come with us, and so I guess I'm on my own here, and now he's leaving me. Like, no, he could have done that. He could have doubted God. But I think that there was something in Moses that immediately knew, like, no, we're past that. I'm not just gonna take the answer that he's giving me. I'm gonna tell him what I'm really thinking. We're past that. And it's why their history is what makes that conversation in Exodus 33 so raw and real. Because you cannot have real conversations if you don't have real relationship. And it's true in your personal life, it's true in your work life, it's true in your relationship with God. You cannot have a real conversation if you don't have a real relationship. How many of you ever received a note like the one that they're about to put on the screen for me? I want you to read it. Did you ever get a note like this? Okay, raise your hand if you received a note like this. Okay, I see like older people raising their hands and the younger people are, okay, let's put our hands down for a moment. Okay, raise your hand if you ever sent a note like this one. All right. So I was talking to Christabel a few weeks ago, and she told me that when she got a note like this, she would add another box at the bottom that said maybe, and she would check that one because she didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And we do that, you know. Do you like me? Check yes, check no. And you know, I think it's kind of funny because we don't just do this, or kids back in the day didn't just do this in school to people that they liked. But I feel like even if the notes don't exist in our time today, this attitude or this way of managing relationships does exist today. And we don't just do it with other people. You know, just tell me what you want. Tell me what you want to go eat so we can figure it out and go and move on. You don't want to have the conversation, you just want to jump to the answer. And we do that with God. God, am I supposed to be a doctor or a lawyer? I really have a passion for both things, and I don't know what I need to major in, and I don't know what I need to study. So if you could just tell me very clearly, doctor, lawyer, check a box so I can move on with my life. God, I don't know if the person I'm dating right now is the person that I'm really supposed to end up with. Like, am I wasting my time or am I doing the right thing? Can you please check the box, yes or no, so that I can just have my answer and move on with my life? God, am I in the right career? Am I doing the right thing in my marriage? God, am I doing the right thing with my kids? God, do I stay or do I go? Do I look for another opportunity? Do I put a stop or do I press in? Check yes or check no so that I know what to do and I can just move on with my life. And we take something that should be relational, and we make it transactional. So you take something that should be special and you try to make it simple. You take something that should be, oh, well, let's see. I think this dress might work. I like the way that it sits like that. And is this the right dress? Ring the bell, like, yay, say yes to the dress. And you want to take that experience, and instead of making it special and making it a decision that you talked through, you thought through, you walked through with and celebrated with the people around you, you want to go to self-checkout and say, okay, I guess that'll work. And it's not the same. And you take something that should be special and you try to make it simple. And we do this in our relationships with the people that we supposedly care about, that we want to make feel special. I see it all the time, even in young people that are dating today. You don't even have to be married. It's like, oh, well, just tell me what you want to do, and that's what we'll do. It's like you don't want to take the time to research what matters to the other person. What are they interested in? When have they felt special before? What little detail could I include that lets them know that I've been thinking about them? What can I do to make this special? No, you just want it to be simple. Tell me the answer, check the box, and let's go. And we do that with God, not just other people. You know, in work, sometimes you can have a boss that is great at giving you instructions. Here's your checklist, this is what you need to do. But you wouldn't go to that person for real advice or if you were struggling with something, because everything's transactional. It's just do your work, clock in, clock out, we're done. Like, you're good. It's different when you have someone that you work with that cares about you more than they care about your job. They treat you differently. You learn more from that person. You learn what real leadership looks like. They take something that should be simple and instead they make it special. But we see it. You know, if you looked at that analogy, like you think about work, we do that with God sometimes. You see him as like the distant boss that just gives you a checklist of this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do, and you leave it at that. And so you keep your relationship with God in this, like, he tells me what to do and he's my Lord and he's my Savior, but he's not really my friend. He's not really my mentor. He's not really the person that I would think to do life with. Or we could see it the way we see sometimes relationship with a husband and a wife who don't really spend quality time together. So when you don't spend quality time together, you can't really expect the deep, meaningful conversations. If they only talk, like really talk when there's a problem, the relationship is gonna feel strained. And your body will even develop like this knee-jerk reaction to, oh, they wanna talk. Oh, this is bad. This is bad. They said the words, they wanna talk. And you can't remember the days when you just talked and stayed up till 3 or 4 in the morning just to talk. And with God, if you don't spend time in his presence, you cannot expect to hear him clearly when a crisis does come along, because you're not used to hearing him in the everyday. Or how about those of us who have that friend, and you know the friend that I'm talking about, the one that only messages you and only calls you when they need something. They don't call you to just say, hey, how are you? What's new? What's happening? That's the person that calls you to say, so I have this thing on Friday and it would be great if you could show up and maybe help me to put some boxes in a truck. They call you when they need something. And with God, how can you expect to have a deep conversation about something when you're in trouble if you don't want to have a deep conversation with him about anything else? Intimacy with God isn't built in crisis. It's built in consistency. Connections are built in crisis. Think about it. When you have a hard time with something, you build a connection with someone else who might be going through the same thing or maybe has been there, done that. You have something to connect over. You can build a connection in the middle of a crisis, and God often will use a crisis for us to build a connection with him. But you don't get to intimacy and close relationships that way. A close relationship, a good marriage, a good friendship is developed in consistency. Moses and the Israelites had both experienced crisis with God, Both of them had been there. They had been through tough things with God, but they were very inconsistent. On top of that, like when this conversation happens, they had just come out of a crisis. Moses had been up on the mountain with God for so long that the Israelites thought, oh my gosh, I think he's dead. I have no idea what we're gonna do. And they turned to Aaron, Moses' brother, and said, can you make us a god, like a golden calf or something to worship and have a festival in the desert? And it says that they took off their jewelry to melt some stuff together so that they could make this golden calf so they could all worship. They had literally just come out of this crisis, all obsessed about jewelry. I know that we probably read that passage earlier and you're like, what is the big deal with the jewelry? Why take off your jewelry? Okay, because God knows that it was a symbol of what they had just been through. That they had melted out something that was precious because God had given it to them when they left Egypt. Scripture says that they literally went to the Egyptians and said, give us your stuff. And the Egyptians were like, here, take it, go. That's what happened. And so this stuff, all this jewelry, all these precious things that they had, the special things, came from the moment that God said, go and ask for it, and they're gonna give it to you. And now here they are in the desert taking this special spoil, this token that God had given them, and they're melting it to give worship to something they made up. But Moses was consistent. So he had access, he had a deep relationship with God. Moses was close to God. It's what lets him have this conversation. Moses had seen God do the impossible. And now he's hearing, I'm not gonna go with you. My presence will go, but I will not go. And I will see the journey to the end. I will see it, watch it from afar. And what's interesting is that this conversation happens in this tension that a lot of us live in. It's that tension when everything seems to be going great in one area and not so good in another area. Remember earlier when I asked, like, what's the area for you where you feel like really successful here, but not like you've got it all together over here? It's the same thing that was happening to Israel. Think about it for a moment. They're not in Egypt anymore. So they don't have to clock in sun up to sundown to work for someone else and get no reward for their work. So work life, career, going great. I'm free, I'm not a slave anymore. I can choose when I get to work. This is great. But they're wandering in the desert. So their home life, not so good, not so stable, because they're picking up camp, walking, and setting up a tent in another area. It was endless camping. So work life, great, got it made, doing so much better. But home life, not so much. You can be in slavery in one area of your life, wandering in the wilderness, the desert, in another area, and living in freedom and in the promised land in another area, all at the same time. And I think often, like, we believe that we are where we are. It is what it is. It's where God has us, and there's nothing we can do to change it. But you know what? That's not completely true. Yes, God does have you where you are. But where you are isn't just about your circumstances or about how you're feeling. It's about what you have chosen to believe. Where you are is about what you have chosen to believe. Because when you come into agreement with an idea, you begin to believe that it's true. And it's that belief, whether the belief is right or wrong, that keeps you where you are. It's that belief that can keep you in slavery. It's the belief that can keep you stuck looking at the Red Sea, not realizing that you gotta walk. It's that belief that can keep you stuck going in cycles of slavery or cycles in the desert. So this is the part where it would be good for you to take notes so you can think about this later. So if you got your phone, I invite you to take some notes. How do you know that an area of your life is stuck in slavery? How do you know? The thoughts in your mind will sound like this. You are powerless to change. This is reality. It's not gonna change. You are what you achieve. You're only as good as what you can make happen, and here lately you can't make anything good happen, so it just is what it is. Here's one a lot of people hear and don't like to face the truth about. When you believe the lie, you were made this way. You were born this way. You can't be any other way. This is what you like, and that's what you like, and that's just the way it's gonna be. This is who you are, and that's just the way it's gonna be. Or you believe something like, there is no reward for my work. There is no point in trying to make an effort. Things will always be this way. I can't change it. I'm powerless. And it's why there is no hope, because you're believing those lies. Slavery kills faith. Slavery kills hope. And scripture tells us that if you're a slave, you're no different than a child in the kingdom of God. You really can't have access to all the other things because slavery's got you tied down. Without faith, you can't please God. And if you're believing those lies, you're slowly killing your hope. You're slowly killing your faith. Because it says that in order to have faith, you gotta believe that God rewards those who seek him. So if in any area of your life you believe that there is no hope and no reward for what you're doing, you've lost your faith. When you're in slavery, you gotta be told what to do. In any area, you've gotta be told. If you aren't told exactly what to do, it's not gonna happen. So there's a lot of waiting around, there's a lot of nothing is happening, there's a lot of nothing is moving in your life because you're waiting on someone to show up and tell you exactly what you must do. And it happens everywhere. We see it happen in church. A lot of people will attend church waiting for someone else to tell them what to do spiritually. They won't take a step out in their faith. They won't take a step to seek God on their own. They're just sitting there waiting for somebody to tell them what to do spiritually, to show up on Sunday, and maybe we'll see if God speaks to me then. Yes, God can speak to you while you're here, but you are stuck in a slavery mindset if you expect for that to be the only way that God speaks to you. And we see it in marriages. We see it when you have one spouse doing all the things and the other spouse just sits there and waits. If you tell me to wash the car, I'll wash the car. If you tell me to mop the floor, then I'll mop the floor. But if nobody tells me to do anything, I'm not gonna do it. I'm just gonna sit here. Take the trash out. If you have to be told everything that you must do, you have a pattern of slavery in your life. And there are things that you will not have access to, things that God cannot do in your life if you don't move past it and say, God, set me free. But you know what's interesting about slavery is that most people don't even realize that they're slaves. They don't know. Harriet Tubman, an abolitionist, part of the Underground Railroad. Did anyone read books about her in school? Lots of good stories about Harriet Tubman. She's got some really good quotes. She said, slavery is the next thing to hell. And followed it up with, I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew that they were slaves. They didn't know. And that's the thing, most of you don't know. You literally don't know. You think this is always the way it's gonna be. You think that this is normal. You think, oh, everyone else lives like this, so I guess it must be normal. You don't know that it could be different. You don't know that it could be better. You don't know that you weren't made like this. You don't know who God really called you to be. You don't know that you're stuck. Frederick Douglass, another activist and abolitionist, said, I didn't know that I was a slave until I found out that I couldn't do the things I really wanted to do. Today, in some areas of your life, God is saying, I can't do the things that I really want to do in you until you realize that this is not where you should be, until you give up on these lies, until you let go, until you let me in, until you realize that you're living in slavery and I can set you free. Can we move past this? So that's one step, but what about the wilderness? How do you know if you're stuck in the desert like the Israelites were? In the wilderness, you wrestle with everything you need being provided for you. You complain, God, I don't have enough of this, or this isn't enough, or this isn't working, or where's my water? Where is my food? And God gives you what you need every time you complain. because he's trying to teach you that he's got your back and that he will be there and that he will provide for whatever it is that you need. And in the wilderness, the other thing that happens is that God slowly does away with your victim mindset. It's when your prayers sound like, God, do you see what they're doing to me? Do you see, God, what happened to me? God, do you see? And there is a time and place to lament with God, and it's important that you go through it because you got to get used to having history with God, to having those conversations with God where you can talk to him about all of those things. But when all of your prayers sound like that, there is something that is also settling in, and it's this victim mindset where it feels unfair and you're going in circles and you're making no progress, but every single time you feel alone at the end of your rope, another miracle is happening. Because that is the thing about the wilderness. Nowhere else do we see more miracles happen all at once for a people other than when Jesus shows up and walks the earth. You have the highest count of miracles in the wilderness. Manna falling from heaven, quail falling from heaven, water coming out of a rock. Miracle after miracle. Healing by staring at a statue. Because in the wilderness, you learn how to hear God. You learn how to hear God's voice and how to be obedient to his voice. You learn to take action, not just when you feel like it, not just when it's convenient, but literally when God says go. You learn that in the desert. In the desert, you'll hear phrases in your mind that sound like this. This is how you know if you're there. You will always be stuck here endlessly. You're going in circles. If God was really with you and for you, life wouldn't be this hard. Is this even worth it? Maybe you should go back to how you did things before. Did God really say that? You must have not heard God correctly because of the way things look. Look around. There's nothing here. Those are the thoughts that will come at your mind when you're in the desert. And it's really hard, but with every single step you take, God is slowly pulling the slavery mindset out of you. He's exchanging it for something better. If you're not sure if you're in the desert, there's one surefire, sure tell all, this is the sign that you're in the desert. The clear sign that you're in the wilderness is that you have just enough. It's not overflow, it's just enough to eat and to be satisfied one day at a time. Scripture says that when God sent manna for the Israelites to eat in Exodus 16:18, that when they measured it out, everyone had just enough. Those who gathered a lot had nothing left over, and those who gathered only a little had enough. Every family had just what it needed. If you're living day to day in your finances, in your health, in your marriage, where it's I'm just day to day, you're in the wilderness. In your life, when you're in the wilderness, in your finances, what it looks like is you make cuts to the budget. You add extra income. You get the extra side gig. You have this other thing going on. You're doing all of the different things, but it doesn't matter what you do. You still have just enough to cover the bare minimum, to have just enough. It's not extra. There isn't left over. And it's because God is teaching you how to depend on him for every single one of your needs. But we stay there. We stay there because I don't think we fully understand what really needs to change in us to go up and take hold of the promised land. You know, because we default to thinking that our way out of the desert is learning to trust in God. So in our humanity, our prayers start to sound like, God, haven't I been through this enough already? Haven't I shown you? Haven't I proved to you that I trust you? Haven't we been around this a million times already? Can we be done with this season now? But we don't realize that the promised land is filled with giants. So not only do you have to trust God to go up against a giant, you have to be willing to fight giants. And in the desert, in the wilderness, yeah, you're learning to trust God, but you also depend on someone to provide everything for you. You don't feel like fighting. There isn't really a warrior within you because some of your mind is still a slave. And cycle by cycle, God is trying to pull that out of you. And in order to go into a promised land, you have to know that a promised land is filled with giants. Yes, there's abundance. Yes, there's overflow. Yes, there's extra there. There's a lot of good things. Scripture describes it over and over as a land flowing with milk and honey. It's to say things that make you strong, things that make life sweet. But we don't realize that the promised land is filled with giants. And not only do you have to trust God to fight a giant, you have to be willing to go up there and face the giant and fight the giant. And you won't be a very good warrior if you're waiting on someone to tell you what you do the way you did in slavery. And you can't win any battles if you don't know how to listen to God's voice to tell you how to fight when it's time to fight. A key lesson from the wilderness. And a lot of us seem to believe that getting to that promise or the promised land is the end or the end goal, but there's more after that. After that comes establishing a kingdom, establishing government, but that whole conversation is for a different day, not today. Today, I want you to ask yourself, where have I settled for success in one area, but I'm accepting defeat in another area? Because that's what's happening. Because if God is with you in your finances, God can be with you in your health. If God showed up for you at home, God can show up for you at work. You do not have to accept what's being handed to you. You have to know what God is trying to change about you, transform about you up here, so you can walk into what He has for you next. Because God never intended for the Israelites to go in circles for 40 years. It was supposed to be a transition. It was supposed to be a fun trip that we got to remember together. Oh, remember all the sand at the beach? It was supposed to be a trip. It wasn't supposed to be where they ended up. And some of them did end up there because they died there. God waited for a whole other generation to rise up, and only a few from the desert got to go to the promised land. Today, I want you to ask yourself, where have I believed that this is just how it is, instead of trusting what God has to say about me, what His promises are for me? You might be excelling in one part of your life, feeling completely stuck in another. You know, the Israelites had left Egypt. Woohoo, big success. They left Egypt, but they were still wandering. Major frustration. And here's the truth. God doesn't just want partial freedom for you or for me. He wants total transformation. So if He has to keep you going in circles for a while until you're able to figure out what He's trying to transform in you, He's going to do that because He cares more about who you become and you knowing who you are to Him, whose you are, than for your external circumstances to change. Where in your life is God saying, we're past that, but you're still holding on to the lies that you have believed, so you can't move past that? A few weeks ago, I was in my morning prayer time, and I was telling God, hey, God, I need direction about this situation at work. And I need to know if I should do this or if I should do that. And then I was saying, and I need to know what your plan is about this thing so that I know in what direction to pray. And then I need to know what you want to do as a next step at church, because I feel like it could go this way or it could go this way, and I'm unsure of which one. Can you pick a box? Can you tell me? I'm telling you that today. I told you the story about the checkbox because it was exactly what God said to me that morning. I was asking Him all these questions and I was getting frustrated, and I said, you're not saying anything. You're not answering me. It's bothering me because I'm used to Him answering me when I say something. I'm used to it. And he wasn't saying anything. And I finally turned and I said, God, why aren't you saying anything to me? And he said, Ashley, we're past that. And in a moment, I need you to understand that a lot of times that the way that God speaks to us, and something, if you've experienced it this way, it's one of the ways that you can understand that God is speaking to you. Because when God speaks, it's usually a word or a phrase, but in your spirit and in your mind, all of a sudden, there's a lot of information available. There is a fullness, an understanding of what that one phrase or that one word really means. And you understand what areas of your life it applies to. You understand a lot in a moment, and you're like, where did that come from? It's like I had a revelation. You did. The Holy Spirit was speaking to you. And so in that moment, God tells me, Ashley, we're past that. And I look up and it's all there. And God says, we're past this version where you are a soldier and you're ready to take orders and I just tell you what to do. We're past that. That's not our relationship status anymore. We're past that. I'm not going to tell you just yes or no, because I'm inviting you to be a part of the solution, to have a conversation with me, for us to say, what do you think that we should do? How should we tackle this? What should we do together? And God was telling me, we're past that. Where in your life is God telling you we're past that? Where you're holding on to a lie from the desert that says this is just who you are, this is just who you're always gonna be. And God is telling you, no, we're past that. That's not who you are. And you hold on to that thought because some of it to this point has become comforting, because it reassures you that, well, I guess I don't really have to change. This is just the way it's going to be, and this is just because you've gotten comfortable with the lie. And today God is telling you, we're past that. Get up, get angry about the lie that you have believed. Get angry about the fact that you have been deceived. You don't have to stay there. You don't have to live like that. We're past that. How often do we make our relationship with God transactional? And sometimes, let me tell you, it's not because you don't love Him. It's not because you haven't had a deep conversation or a deep relationship with Him. Sometimes you default to making your relationship with God transactional because you're desperate for clarity. You're desperate for a way out. But God was telling me, Ashley, we're past that. We're friends. You know me as Lord. You know me as Savior. You know me as Father. You also know me as friend. You know me as friend. And I'm not the kind of friend who is just gonna say, I agree with you, yeah, stay the way that you are, because I'm a good friend. I'm the kind of friend that says, you don't have to stay where you are. I've got all this for you. But you're staying with this thought that this is just the way it's gonna be. And we're past that. We're past the transactional relationship. I want more. We're past you needing to be told every Sunday what you must do. You are not a slave. I have set you free. We're past you complaining every time you're unsure and scared. I've already shown you that I'm with you and I'm not going to fail you. Are you really going to trust me? We're past that. We're past you playing the victim. I need the warrior in you to come out. The kind of warrior that doesn't just go up and fight when they're triggered, but the kind of warrior that goes and looks for the giant. The kind that picks out the fight because they already know they're gonna win. Where in your life are you settling, either in slavery or either in the desert, where God is calling you forward? We're past that. I love you, and we're past that. settled on something and God is calling you forward out of it. So I want you to symbolically come forward. And as the team sings this song, I want you to symbolically come forward to say, yeah, God, we're past that. Yeah, God, I get it. Yeah, God, I'm on board. Yes, we're past that. Whatever the area is for you that we're past. And I want you to remember the words we read at the beginning. A lot of things change in God's presence. And God offered to Moses, well, my presence will go with you. And he said, no, I want you. I want everything. I want you to be that bold to say that to God this morning.
presence. We are undone here right now. Here in your presence, heaven and earth become one. Here in your presence, all things are new. Here in your presence, everything bows before you.
There where you are, I want you to say this with me. I'm going to say, God, today, we're past that. I'm not going to accept that it's just going to be this way in one area and that you don't touch the others. Transform all of me. You have permission. And today, I boldly declare, we are past that.
Thanks for joining us today. I know that you received something. Either you learned something new, God spoke to your heart, or confirmed something that you already likely knew was the next step. And that's all that we can hope for. As a church, our mission is to go after the one. And today, you were that one. If you would like to help us power this mission forward to make a difference in our community and reach more ones just like you, then I hope that you can join me in supporting by giving online. Visit the99church.com and click on Give. I really appreciate you being here, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks for joining us today. I know that you received something. Either you learned something new, God spoke to your heart, or confirmed something that you already likely knew was the next step. And that's all that we can hope for. As a church, our mission is to go after the one. And today, you were that one. If you would like to help us power this mission forward to make a difference in our community and reach more ones just like you, then I hope that you can join me in supporting by giving online. Visit the99church.com and click on Give. I really appreciate you being here, and I hope to see you next time.